Tonight on the show, is Greece-style economic crisis inevitable in Japan? Japan's Prime Minister said Japan's fiscal situation is worse than Greece. Is Japan's economy on the verge of bankruptcy? Good evening, you're watching TKC World, where we make sense of the global events with straight facts and sharp analysis. Also coming up on the show, is China the real winner in the India-Pakistan war? Meanwhile, the United Kingdom, France and the Canada warn Israel of consequences on Gaza. Is Israel's political goodwill over? And there is another controversy brewing in United States of America. Is Trump lying about a $400 million gift from Qatar? Insider says yes. And finally, Bangalore Floods Again, 3 dies. Who is accountable for this? And where is our tax money going? All this is lined up. Let's get started. Japan's Prime Minister has compared the country's situation to one of the worst modern economic disasters, and that is the economic crisis of Greece. Prime Minister of Japan has said something very shocking, that Japan's fiscal situation is worse than that of Greece. If you remember, Greece went through a brutal financial crisis that lasted for over a decade. It had to borrow billions and billions of dollars from the European Union and the International Monetary Fund just to survive. So let's start by understanding what's going in Japan, or rather what's going wrong in Japan. According to their Prime Minister, Japan is struggling with a mix of rising interest rates, falling exports and a shrinking economy. In fact, Japan's economy shrank by 0.7% between January and March, much worse than the expected 0.2%. That means people are spending less and the country is exporting less. Meanwhile, welfare costs are going up and that's putting more pressure on government spending. To make matters worse, opposition leaders are now demanding tax cuts just before an election. But Prime Minister is pushing back. He says cutting taxes now could make things even worse, not better. So is Japan going the way of Greece? That is the most important question. Well, there are some alarming signs. The International Monetary Fund says Japan's government debt is now nearly 235% of its GDP. Now compare that to Greece, whose debt during its crisis was about 142%. That's a big difference. Also, Japan's economy is heavily impacted by global trade, especially with the United States of America. Right now, the US is placing heavy tariffs on Japanese goods, including a 25% tariffs on car from Kyoto. Negotiations are ongoing, but experts say that the United States has little incentive to compromise. And Japan isn't backing down either, especially in the sensitive areas like that of agriculture. But here is a twist. Japan is not exactly like Greece. There are two major differences. First, most of Greece's debt was owned by foreign investors. Japan's debt, however, is mostly owned by its own citizens. That means Japan has a lot more control over how it manages its debt. Second, Japan holds a powerful card. It is the largest foreign holder of US Treasury bonds, owing over $1.1 trillion. That gives Japan some leverage in its trade talks with the United States. Plus, while the US is pressuring Japan, it's also facing its own financial economic troubles. The US just lost its perfect AAA credit rating and its national debt, it has staggering $36 trillion. So where does this leave Japan? Japan's economy is definitely at risk. It lacks strong growth drivers and it's vulnerable to shocks like more tariffs from the United States. Economists warn that unless Japan boosts spending or finds a new engine for growth, a recession could be on the horizon. But for now, while Japan's boat is rocking, it hasn't sunk. Whether it sails through or sinks depends on what happens next. Now for days we in India have been discussing how we have decimated Pakistan and their defense systems, how we have won this war. But no one is talking about a silent winner in this whole conflict. It began on May 7 when India launched Operation Sindhur in retaliation for a brutal terrorist attack in Kashmir that killed 26 people on April 22nd. And what followed was a series of tit-for-tat military actions. Both sides used drones, missiles and fighter jets in a show of strength. India flew its French Rafales and Russian Sukhois, Pakistan in turn used its JF-17s and J-10s fighter jets made in partnership with China. That's where things get interesting. While India and Pakistan both claimed victory, there is one more player quietly walking away with what world is saying a potential win, and that is China. Why? Because Pakistan's entire air response was powered by Chinese-made jets and missiles. In fact, Pakistan even claimed to have shot down 6 Indian jets, including the prized Rafales, using China's J-10 aircraft. While Pakistan was not able to prove these baseless claims, even the idea, even the suggestion of a successful Chinese military performance is enough to boost China's image on the world stage in terms of their defense exports. A Chinese analyst called this China's quote-unquote deep-seek moment, referring to a Chinese AI startup that shocked the world earlier this year by challenging US tech giants. For China's defense industry, this was its first real active test in active combat. And at least in terms of perception, it passed. Shares of major Chinese fighter jet manufacturers jumped 40% in the days after the conflict. 40%, 40. On Chinese social media, nationalistic pride was at all-time high, with users celebrating what they saw as a proof that Chinese weapons could challenge Western technology or Western defense exports. But not everyone is convinced. Some defense experts say it's too early to declare Chinese supremacy, the supremacy of Chinese-made jets. Professor Walter Ladwig from King's College London pointed out that the real story might be more complex. He believes India deliberately avoided pushing Pakistan too far, focusing instead on precise airstrikes against terror infrastructure. According to many published and unpublished reports, India struck 11 Pakistani air bases, including sensitive ones like Noor Khan, just outside Rawalpindi. The missile strikes were accurate, and the runway craters hit exactly where they should have hit. Still, by staying silent on the details, India may have lost the control of the narrative, or as they say, the narrative warfare. And in today's world, perception often matters more than reality. And for China, this was a golden opportunity. Its longtime ally Pakistan used Chinese hardware to stand its ground against a regional rival. And even if Beijing remained quiet officially, it surely noticed the global attention. Especially because China is investing over $50 billion in Pakistan under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. A strong Pakistan is China's strategic asset. So is China the winner? Militarily, the answer is unclear, or rather I should say no. But in terms of perception, influence, and a powerful sales pitch for its weapon industry, it's about to get some benefit. It has gained the ground. And for India, this may be just a wake-up call. The future of warfare is changing, and the battlefield might not be the only place where wars are won. In the fog of war, perception often writes the first draft of history. And this time, that draft favors China. The patience of Israeli allies is running out. After more than 7 months of intense warfare in Gaza, key allies like the United Kingdom, France and Canada have issued their strongest warning yet. Stop the offensive or face the consequences. This message comes as Israeli airstrikes continue pounding Gaza, with more than 300 Palestinians killed in the last wave, including women, children, and aid workers. One strike hit a school turned shelter, another hit a family house, and in just 30 minutes, at least 38 Palestinians were killed in an overnight bombing. A school, an abandoned fuel station, and even ambulances were amongst the targeted. So why now? Why are countries that have stood by Israel for months and months suddenly taking such a hard line, suddenly taking such a hard stance against Israel? So let's rewind a little. After the October 7 Hamas attack that killed 1,200 Israelis and saw 251 people taken hostage, the West gave Israel something priceless: a huge reserve of international goodwill. They believed Israel had the right to defend itself, but now that goodwill appears to be gone. The final tipping point It wasn't just the rising death toll, it was the killing of 15 paramedics and aid workers in a convoy followed by Israel alleged covering their bodies in sand. A recovered phone video later showed that clearly marked ambulances were deliberately targeted, contradicting Israel's official explanation of this whole event. So that was the tipping point. That moment, according to the European diplomat, crossed a red line. And on Monday, the UK, France, and Canada jointly declared the level of human suffering in Gaza to be intolerable. Finally, they have said that. And Israel's latest offensive, a complete disproportionate. They threatened quote unquote concrete actions unless the military campaign stops and more humanitarian aid is allowed into Gaza. And here is the twist. The criticism isn't just coming from abroad. Even inside Israel, their own country, prominent opposition voices are warning that the country is becoming, quote unquote, an outcast among the nations. Yet a retired general and political leader slammed the war strategy, saying, and I quote very sincerely, a sane country doesn't kill babies as a hobby. That is a very strong statement. In response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu allowed a minimum amount of aid into Gaza. That's a minimal amount. But critics say it's not enough. Only 5 UN trucks made it through. Netanyahu admitted the move came under pressure from allies, but he insists Israel must decimate, defeat Hamas, and secure Gaza completely. Anything less, he says, would reward the terrorism. However, his decision drew outrage from the hardliners in his own coalition, who accused him of fueling Hamas. And now France, Canada, and the UK are warning, if Israel doesn't stop war, we will act. What that action will look like, it's unclear, but it could include sanctions or even recognizing Palestine as an independent state, a move that has already been backed by some 148 countries. The political tide is clearly turning. As Israel prepares and pressures forwards in Gaza, it may find itself increasingly isolated in the global dynamics, even by those who once stood firmly in its corner. Because in global politics, goodwill isn't infinite. Once it's gone, the consequences can be very real. So here is the big question. Did Qatar really offer Donald Trump a $400 million Boeing 747 as a gift? That's what Trump says, but new reports suggest, well, not exactly. According to 4 sources who spoke to CNN, it was actually Trump's own administration that first reached out to Qatar, not the other way around. Why? Because the United States Air Force needed a temporary replacement for Air Force One. And Boeing told the president, the Pentagon, it wouldn't be ready with new presidential jets for another 2 years. Trump, eager for a quicker solution, had his envoy, Steve Witkoff, start searching. Boeing in response gave a list of potential options, including Qatar, which owns a customized Boeing 747-8. And so then came the talks. The Pentagon approached Qatar, and sources say Qatar was open to selling or maybe leasing the plane. But that's a big contrast to what Trump has been telling the public, what he has been telling to the media. On his social media platform, he called the plane a quote-unquote gift free of charge from Qatar's royal family. He also claimed he wouldn't personally fly on it and said it would eventually be handed over to his presidential library. Meanwhile, Qatar's prime minister has avoided directly confirming Trump's version, so it raises suspicion. In an interview, he emphasized that this is strictly a government-to-government discussion between Qatar's Ministry of Defense and US Department of Defense, and that legal terms are still being reviewed. It has nothing to do with individuals. This is what he said in his exact words. But the story has already triggered a political firestorm in the United States of America. Some Democrats and even a handful of Republicans have raised red flags or ethics, questioning whether such a deal, if expected or accepted, would be appropriate, especially given Trump's ongoing political activities. That is a very important question. It raises concern over ethics. Even if the US gets the plane, converting it into an Air Force One style aircraft is no small task, no small talk. Experts say it would take another 2 years and cost hundreds and hundreds of millions to install the secure communication, defenses, and classified tech that a US president needs on board. For now, the plane sits still unused. Lawyers are negotiating, and Trump is still frustrated that Boeing hasn't delivered on time. But whether this Qatari jumbo is truly a quote-unquote gift or just another twist in political spin is still up in the air. But if there is something that I can tell you for sure is that there is definitely not for charge. As President Trump said, this is definitely not of charge. There are strings attached, and we will certainly come to know about that very, very soon, because such things can't be hidden for so long and nothing is free. India's Silicon Valley is under water again. This week, Bangalore, the tech capital of India, saw roads turn into rivers, homes flood, and offices shut down as pre-monsoon rains hit the city. A record 100 of rain in a single day left people stranded, wading through knee-deep water, and 3 lives lost, including a 12-year-old boy and a woman crushed when a tech company's wall collapsed. So that is the update on Bangalore's flood. And this isn't for the first time. Every year, the same story repeats itself. Floods, traffic chaos, damaged homes, broken promises, and dying people. Officials scramble to reassure the public. But how long will we keep hearing the same excuse? These are long-standing issues. Officials always say the same thing. Let's be honest, Bangalore isn't just a city. It is home to India's biggest tech companies, global startups, and some of highest taxpayers in the country. This city fuels India's digital economy, and yet its infrastructure collapses every time it rains. The government says it's identified 210 flood-prone areas and is working round the clock. The deputy chief minister even told residents not to worry. But residents are worried and frustrated as well. One resident pointed out that ironically, the areas developed for the tech sectors are the worst hit. That's not just a design flaw, that's a failure in planning. And where exactly is all that tax money going? Tech workers, companies, and ordinary citizens contribute billions and billions in taxes. But as the president of Association of Information Technology put it bluntly, there is no return on investment. There is no return on the tax that we are paying. The opposition BJP has slammed the ruling Congress government, demanding 10,000 crores for relief. The Congress says the problem is decades old and blames bad planning across governments. But for citizens stuck in the flooded homes, that political back and forth is of no use at all. If this is the condition of India's so-called quote-unquote tech capital, what can we expect in smaller towns and rural areas? What message does this send to the world? That even in one of our richest cities, we cannot protect people from the rain. It's not just about weather anymore. It's about accountability. It's about planning. It's about a city and a country that deserves better. If India's Silicon Valley drowns every year, the flood we really need is one of political will. And that's all I have for you on the show tonight, dear viewers. Now I will see you tomorrow. Until then, take care and good night.